It's time for our number of the day, and today that number is 7 billion rand. New research conducted by the Southern Africa Towards Inclusive Economic Development estimates that South Africa loses about 7 billion rand a year due to profit shifting by multinational corporations. This amounts to about 4% of total current corporate income tax receipts. The study is the first of its kind, and a key finding suggests that 98% of the tax loss is associated with profit shifting. Now, for more on this, I'm joined from Denmark on Skype by our guest, Ludvig Wier, who's a doctoral fellow at the University of Copenhagen and SA Tide researcher. Thanks so much for your time on Full View tonight. Explain to us what profit shifting is.
Thank you so much for having me. So, as you already know, firms, they can exploit loopholes in the current international tax laws and shift their taxable income to tax havens. And in this way, they can avoid corporate taxation altogether. Now, in this new research project, we find that the South African firms, they are engaged in this type of behavior, and it's important to understand that why this is happening is really because of some fundamental flaws in the international tax laws that, for example, allows a firm to shift their intangible assets to tax havens. Now this sounds very absurd because it is a bit absurd, right? How can you move something that isn't really present in the physical world? But that is what current tax laws allows, and that is why we're seeing this type of behavior.
What kind of companies are engaged in this behavior, and is it the majority of companies in South Africa?
So a really interesting finding is actually that the vast majority of companies in South Africa are not engaged in this type of behavior at all. It's really only the very largest firms. So what we find is that 98% of all profit shifting is being done by only 10% of the very largest firms, right? So you have a situation where most firms do not engage in this type of behavior, but a few very large firms do. And that's a problem beyond tax collection because that really distorts competition.
Mm-hmm. You said that another place where there's loss in terms of taxes, transfer mispricing on goods imports.
Yeah, so that's really one of the ways that you can shift your taxable income. That is when you're transacting internally in goods. And this is another study that has also been conducted by me, where the good news is that maybe something can be done here. Maybe using new big data analytics, the South African Revenue Authority and revenue authorities across the world might be able to recoup some of this tax loss by using these new machine learning techniques, etc.
And so how much does that mispricing cost South Africa?
That's about 1 billion rand. So it's a minority share, but it's a share that we might be able to recoup using these modern statistical techniques. So there is some hope that some of this loss can be recouped.
And so talk to us about how transfer mispricing decreased momentarily, but since has returned to its former levels.
So all the time, the OECD and South Africa is engaged in trying to implement new laws that can limit this type of behavior. And what we really saw in South Africa was that the introduction of new transfer mispricing legislation that really led to a decrease in this behavior. But then after a couple of years, firms, they found a new way to get around this, and it returned to its original level. So that's really showing that this is not an easy problem to tackle. And we can't make small solutions. We really have to think of how we can fundamentally reform the corporate tax system in a way where firms simply cannot do this anymore.
Thanks so much for your time, Ludvig Wier. He's a doctoral fellow at the University of Copenhagen and an SA Tide researcher.